Okay, and hello, and welcome to Animesplaining. And fuck, I screwed up the intro. Fuck. Oh well. This is
At least there's no more rhyming.
that's
No
what I was
more
going to
rhyming.
do. I was going to bring back the
Uh,
rhyming. I was going to say my eyes are blue now because it's episode not because I have the space flu. It's episode number 2. And then
the space flu?
it's that's just as good as Char's like excuse for his eyes no longer being brown.
I
Oh,
have a retinal distraction.
oh
It was
yeah.
like
I was on a flight from Florida, and it's cosmic rays. I looked too close at the sun, and now
Hey,
my eyes are blue.
he created a mutiny among his entire class. His entire class was like, "You took off sunglasses. You should put them back on and apologize." Dumb.
That's oh, you don't like the totally easy rebellion. We will get to episode 3.
I'm not. I'm fine with the why are we even a military? We're outmanned and outgunned. What is the point of us even doing this? And it rallies all the troops somehow instead of making everybody just go home.
Yeah, so to give viewers out there a kind of just general idea. So Animesplaining, once again, used to be a podcast, no longer a podcast, now a video podcast, which is like a podcast except with video, and makes it so I don't need to edit. But back then, Joey, we got to watch Gundam the 08th MS Team, which is after the events of Gundam the Origin. But it's generally giant robots, Zeon versus the Earth Federation forces. You did not like it a whole lot.
I didn't like the beginning, that was for sure. Because the beginning drags on. There's some coolness, but then the ending is dumb. We've talked about it. Go back in the archive podcast of how dumb the final episode of that is.
Yeah, so then 20 years later, we have Gundam the Origin, which was a project to basically give some backstory. It is the Star Wars prequel trilogy of Gundam, except I would argue it's actually good, which is the main benefit that it has. But the story revolves around, the rise of Zeon and the rise of Char Aznable as this ace pilot, because he is the primary antagonist of the Mobile Suit Gundam Universal Century timeline, because I won't even get to the multiple timelines of Gundam. That will be here all day if I start giving you the side stories and things like that. But at least from the start, in general, kind of general thoughts for now, you seemed more positive on this, correct?
I kind of saw where they were going. Like the origin, because I like the intros to each episode, or at least 2 and 3, where they really just take you down and rehash everything in the episode. So it's like, oh, okay, like this is where I left off, and we're moving forward here. It starts as a good starting place, and at least the first 2 episodes are kind of consistent, and then the third one kind of goes off the rails. It's action packed. It's very easy to watch. I will say that about episode 3. Like I had no problem paying attention for the entire hour on that one.
Episode 3 moves. Every single time I watch episode 3, I'm like, this episode's an hour long?
Yeah.
It feels so much shorter because the first 2 episodes are just place setting for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
There's here is your required action scene. You get one. You only get one. you better enjoy it. But so the first episode, Blue-Eyed Casval, which is the thing that the poster is up for right now, gives you here is your big mobile suit battle. Hope you enjoy this because you will not see any of these for 3 episodes.
Hey, you get the warm up in episode 2.
yeah, you get to see the origin of the mobile suits, and we'll kind of get into what the hell Minovsky particles are, and um, that whole kind of world building sense of things. Um, but one of the things that you did not like about Gundam the 08th MS team was the lack of world building. It kind of just assumes that you know roughly what's going on and kind of just moves its story to say, "Hey, here's Romeo and Juliet in this space opera format." This one is a little bit more down in the weeds. So did you prefer that kind of method of storytelling overall and focusing on basically a bunch of rich space folk?
I mean, the rich space folk, it was kind of unclear of like what people's motivations and alliances are, especially in the first two episodes. Outside of like, this family's good, kind of. This family's bad, mostly. This one, yeah, like outside of that. Whereas in the 08th MS team, you had Xeon for most of the episodes, just this nameless, faceless enemy that's just bad to be bad. And then they have the one scientist plot, which is, I mean, the brother sister thing, which was what it was. But so the best part of the action was just like the robots fighting, but they tried to make you care about people that to me weren't really worth being cared about, especially on this. Like, I should feel bad for these rebels, but I shouldn't because they've already picked a side and picked alliances. I don't know. Those 08th MS team was very inconsistent. This one, at least, again, it generates interest right away. It's trying to be like the flashback to watch this ultimate cause, and I like a story told that way where basically it just shows how chaos escalates. I'm that general type of story. Going back to Jurassic Park being a little kid.
Did you like the big space battle out of context at the very beginning? The here is your action scene right away, and this is what you need to be happy with for the next
I
3 hours.
just thought the space battle was kind of intense. It's like all of a sudden this one giant robot is just knocking it like, oh, the entire fleet is like, Mop, why are we even here? We're just destroying these people. And then this one robot starts jumping around, annihilating like the entire fleet. It was like, oh, okay. But it looks like these guys are bad because it looks like some of these other pilots and these robots, they're kind of animated to look like dicks. So
so this is kind of what I was thinking with, especially considering Gundam the 08th MS team. Um, do you think it helps to show you Char as a space pilot Char first and go like, hey, this is Char. He's pretty badass. Let's see his story. And then it goes to the flashback. Or do you think it would have been better to just start with the flashback? Because in my opinion, and this is one of my only good takeaways from the movie Oppenheimer, I honestly think that the 08th MS team would have been better suited if they started with that one military tribunal episode and kind of used that as a framing device and kind of worked backwards and just kept returning to that, because that's the height of that show. But if this is called Gundam the Origin, why do you need to give us a little taste of like, oh, this is where it's going in the middle? Because I will tell you that fight is in the middle of this 6-episode series, but like the story for the next like 2 hours is going to focus on these children.
From a consistency, because the first two episodes you don't really know, at least most of the first two episodes, you find out in the end of episode 2, but you don't know who Char Aznable is. So the first scene really has no relevance, at least when you watch the episode 1, because you're like, who's this guy? It has no relevance to what I'm being told. Like, I don't get what. So I would say it would lean better from a pure storytelling perspective to just lean from the flashback. But I mean, I mean, as well as any kind of writing, you got to capture people's interest right off the bat.
Yeah.
So how are you going to capture people's interest? Blow shit up.
Yeah,
so,
and And I can say for certain that, like, the first two episodes, some parts feel way too fairy tale for me. Mainly episode 2 when their mom gets locked in a tower and it, that's its whole weird thing.
By his ex-wife is whatever. Dumb.
But yeah, so general story of Gundam, you have Zeon Zun Daikun, the quote-unquote founder of the Duchy of Zeon. The reason why he's not really the founder of Zeon is because while declaring independence, he suddenly dies from a heart attack. People think he was poisoned. My personal reading is that he just had a heart attack, and people went off the rails on it. But then the Zabi family takes over. They try to annihilate the remainder of the Daikun family, or at least keep them off to the side. They don't want to, like, actually just outright assassinate them unless they try to. It just seems very inconsistent when they're like, in full we're going to kill these people mode, to like, oh well, we can't outplay our hand, we need to wait thing.
Well, they're very cartoon villainish, like
They're
just kill people and then I will assume it's done. You don't need to show me a body. I just assume that all went well and I can turn around and move on with my life.
The zombies are just the Lannisters. That is all they are. They are the Lannisters of this thing, which doesn't necessarily make the Daikuns the Starks. It's just like,
what does that make the Rawls? Just idiots? Well, I guess the one dude did help like them escape, like the one son. Like the older Rawl is just like, well, I'm here to protect you. It was like, oh, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, Jimber Rawl is like a true believer in what Zeon Zun Daikun is espousing, which I will say this, on my first watch of Gundam the Origin, I already knew what new types were, because I understood what Mobile Suit Gundam was, and new types are this idea that once humans get to space, your general understanding of the world is expounded and you gain psychic powers. And it is probably the worst part of Gundam that he is right. But it used to be like, oh, so humans go to space colonies for 80 years, because obviously once we start living in space colony, that's when we become the universal century. And within 80 years, you suddenly convince all these people who decide to live in space colonies that you are superior to the Earth. Not just, like, in general, we have a better society, but legitimately we are separate beings. And now I look at, current political landscape, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, yeah, a little bit. I could see that, actually. Like, hey, I'm alienated over here, so all my ideas are right. And who are those people? Enemy. So, yeah, that sadly does resonate pretty well. Should we be glad that Daikun dies in the beginning, seeing how his son kind of progresses into this god-awful human being?
What is your take on Zeon Zun Daikun? Is he assassinated, or is it just the tragedy of he suddenly died at the absolute inopportune time? And
I mean, that it makes sense because the way you say it, like because I mean, it shows him massively stressed out because he wants this to be the speech of all speeches. This needs to rally every single person that's ever been to space to rebel and want independence. So, but at the same time, I mean, again, like, they're trying to... Because you already know from watching the 08th MS team, at least I do, that these are the bad guys. At least I'm assuming.
Yep.
And that's why they have a flag that looks to be inspired by Nazi Germany. Which is a whole other thing. Like, why is it always Nazi Germany? Like, why... Like, you're in Japan, can you be inspired by Imperial Japan? They weren't good. Certainly fascist Italy, they weren't good. They were the originators of fascism, at least in the last century. So, but it's the easiest way to, like, get in fact in episode 3 where the one student says the pile and that.
Sometimes you need to be very, very blatant, is what I think it comes down to. But still, I like the idea that when the Duchy of Zeon is finding what their flag should be post independence, and they give them the design, and it's like, this kind of looks like the Nazis, doesn't it? Oh, I never noticed. That makes sense, and then they just use it anyway.
Well, and that's the other thing about Xeon. Like they make him out to like this kind of sympathetic, great leader, but at the same time, of like, look at what he's leading. I don't see the good here. I really don't.
He is leading a bunch of second generation rich people who left Earth for the space colonies, who now
believe they're superior because they're mutants.
Yep, that believe they're superior, and oh man, we don't want the money of the space colonies going to Earth. They'll just ruin it with their. It's like it's very much like this is what the suburbanites feel about the cities thing. Is how.
I mean, if there's a bit of taxation without representation, but they don't outrightly say that, that's fine.
But on top of that, they're incompetent. On top of it, it's like, here's Texas colony, but it looks like Wyoming. We wanted to create a colony where everyone could be cowboys, but that's episode 2.
Isn't that the Earth? Isn't that partially the Earth Federation's fault too, for just not running a good, solid government out there? But I don't know. It's, again, you're showing how things devolve without asking like the fun questions. Instead, you're just showing this ludicrous story, much like the last Mission Impossible movie.
Joey, if you set off a space colony from the Earth, I'm going to ask you this. Who do you get to govern Disney World? Texas Colony is a theme park that people just
obviously it's the reanimated Ted Williams, because you probably can't reanimate Walt Disney, so just make it the next famous person that tried to cryogenically freeze himself and make it Ted Williams.
But so here's the thing. I'll say there's memorable characters in this first episode. I do like Dozel Zabi. I like his big oafishness. I really like him surviving the assassination attempt that kills his brother, and he's like,
because his brothers, again, they're good. This show is very good at. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. The first episode are good at killing kind of the dickish characters.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third one is just sad.
But
it's my brother just slapped the hell out of my cousin. I wonder what's going to happen next. Boom.
But yeah, so it has memorable characters, but overall, like I said, a lot of episode 1 and 2 is sort of place setting, and they kind of just blend together. Because Kid Casval is like equally a blank slate and also equally a sociopath.
He basically almost tries to start at least a civil war within this space colony in the beginning of the first episode when they're doing their escapes. Like, who's firing the weapons in this tank? It's like, oh, somehow we just put this 11-year-old traumatized child at the controls.
Yeah,
this sounds like
and they give no payoff to it. Like, he just killed like entire crews of people. They
escaped in a sewer conveniently.
Yeah, you see the inside of the gun tank. The gun tank at that point is like manned by like 5 people, and he kills 3 of them. But like, I feel like there's not enough. Like, they overplayed their hand with the whole like Casval Daikun is a new type, so he's basically psychic and knows things that are coming. That's what you basically read into a lot of that's how they kind of hand wave away a lot of how does this guy know. What?
Do you feel like you get some of that in the first episode?
It's I think it's kind of like teased just in that he seems like smarter than your average kid, and he seems like more aware of his surroundings than anything.
Mhm.
But no, the true like new type shit starts coming in like more around episode 3, um, because that's when it's like, oh, he's this meticulous planner, and he can like put all of these things in motion that seem pretty ludicrous, do a fucking Hitman level and just go into a bathroom and talk completely different. Not even talk completely differently. He's talking the same. We will get to episode 3.
This episode 3 is
but
there's a lot.
but like the other thing that doesn't seem to be paid off to me is when Cassilia Zabi is the one who like accosts him, and he does the like, oh, you'll not kill me because blah 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 blah. Our family means too much before they go off to Texas Colony. It's like, if you want people to like not necessarily feel for the character, but like you should put the character in his place at that point. You should just have Cassilia like slap the shit out of him because he's still a child.
That's because you want Joffrey to get his payoff. That's Game of Thrones-ish. I mean, the bottom line is the problem with this episode is they felt they needed to devote more action to it instead of just telling a story. And because of the action, a lot of it like it skews the story a certain way where it doesn't always make sense. If this was just a simple story where Rambaral helps now I forgot the name of the other character that helps him escape, the female soldier.
Oh yeah,
But
Artesia,
yeah,
not Artesia, but their mom's sister, basically.
is it their mom's sister?
I think it is. Like it,
Hmm.
they look exactly the same.
They do look exactly the same. But if you eliminated, like, if you could just make somehow the mom needs to just stay where she is and basically live her life as like some sort of political figure, then that's fine. But you just play the children escape this family and then live out their lives in hiding, and then things escalate where we see in episode 3. It would make a lot more sense. But the problem is, like, and we'll get into episode 2 where like, oh, the zombies always knew where they were just watching them from afar, and now they feel like their power is getting too big, or now it feels like, now their very existence threatens us. And you'll get that in episode 2 with the knight in shining armor sequence.
Yeah.
But it's, if there was just simply that, instead what you get in episode 1 is you get the ludicrous Casval taking the helms of the tank and annihilating basically like a tank platoon. And then you have it, and then conveniently they're surrounded by surveillance all over the place, and they still escape into a sewer. On top of that, you have the wife of Zeon Daikun suddenly like being abducted and taken prisoner into a tower by his ex-wife, which was almost a non-payoff in and of itself, that in an entire storyline that doesn't make sense. In fact, in the next episode, you pretty much need just made to forget about it because, oh, by the way, she's dead. So you can just forget about this stupid storyline that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, like it.
So
It felt like that was trying to set up like their mom like stands up for herself and something happens, but that doesn't even happen. It's just, okay, I'll just be in this tower.
And that's why, like, I mean, again, we're just doing hindsight 2020, so it's easy to write the show after it happens. But, like, again, if you made it just so, like, hey, the wife of Daikun needs to stay here and basically become this political icon because she wields a lot of influence and basically plays, like, the royal figure, like a Princess Diana type role in influencing policy. But at the same time, she sees the danger her children are in, so she just has them secretly escape. It makes for a much more boring episode, I will say, but it progresses the story much better, where episode 2 I feel would get more interesting, and then episode 3. Well, episode 3 was interesting.
Yeah,
So
I feel
I'm not.
like the general like theme of Animesplaining in general is going to be this anime is too big. It needs to be more quiet. We are the like anime quote unquote fan equivalent of the old pro wrestling podcast that tells people to slow down all the time. That is what we have become.
20 minutes of headlocks before the climax.
But I do think that the first episode really should have just been pretty quiet. Like, you make it more a, not even a heist movie, but you make it, like, surrounding, hey, the Daikun kids need to get out of here. And this is how they get out of here. And not have a giant tank going, that's the size of a building, going down the street, wreaking havoc. That seems superfluous. But anyway, let me grab a new image here, because we are done talking about Blue-Eyed Castle. And this is the problem when both these things look the same. Nope, that's episode 3.
Are there people from episodes 1 and 2 we will legit not see again for the rest of the series? Or at least do we see this character again? Or at least all of these characters again?
Kind of, sort of. I mean, there are... Sometimes they, like, actively give a character, like, this is their name and this is who they are. And it's because they're going to show up later in the actual Gundam series. But, yeah, for the most part, at least the major player characters do show up again. Like, at, Teabalo
so, like,
Moss comes back.
So we'll see, like, Rambaral again. We'll see...
Yeah, Rambaral gets fat and just becomes, like a burly commander dude, and he is awesome. And, like, even with the 1970s, like, potato-like animation that original Gundam had, Rambaral against Amuro Ray, the first introduction of the goof is very good.
Mm-hmm.
But,
well, something to look forward to when we watch the next 3 episodes then.
But if you want good screams, Artesia's Sorrow will give you some good screams, because literally anything that is bad that happens to Artesia, she just gives no.
That sounded like a weird cat.
It's a good scream. I cannot do it justice.
Oh, you obviously cannot.
But this is the one that feels too fairy tale to me. One, they're in a theme park that's based on the Old West, so that in general is kind of goofy.
I know Westworld did it better, didn't it?
But it's this sort of like this feels like filler is the problem with it. At the end of the day, this feels like we can't immediately go to Char is at the military academy. We can't have that much of a jump. So we need to literally count full moons until their mom dies and the plot can happen.
There's more than that. Like, they have to do the knight in shining armor sequence where, like, hey, Jimbaral's got too big of a mouth. So we need to annihilate this character. 1, because he's annoying. 2, because we have to let the plot happen and still inform the viewer that these 2 children are still in danger. Even though it says, like, we've watched you the whole time. So that's stupid. It has to create, like, this still power play within the Zabi family where now, at least in the first episode, where I'll agree with you is it seemed like the Zabi family were basically just, like, the rich family versus, like, the political power players in the Daikun family. Mm-hmm. And it felt like kind of corporate versus government, at least, like, a little bit there. And then in episode 2, you realize the Zabis are just basically military leaders. Then it's like, oh, it's just government versus government. I would have been interested to see basically Amazon versus the government. There would be, at least that's interesting. Instead, we don't get that, and they kind of ruin that plot point. So you see, like, oh, there's still a little bit more infighting in the Zabi family, but at the same time, I'm supposed to like Dozel, but he's working with now Rambaral after he's having a bar fight, which doesn't like again like there's a lot of inconsistency. You get like, hey, should I care about this guy in the beginning that took in the two children, but then he gets massacred and is like, oh, I guess I have to give them up. They have my name,
Yep.
and I show how much I care about them. But now I'm a character you can completely forget about.
Oh, Teablo Moss does come back. That's why he survived his getting thrown out a window. Um, but yeah, it is the countdown for Artesia dying, and then you get some good anime violence when when the when the rebels like it's kind of just like insurgents storm the Moss estate, and you get some good machine gunning violence. I will say that that's like out of place violence. But then you have the stupidity of someone who decides to don a suit of armor that apparently they found at the estate and just go around like they're a movie slasher villain. That's
And still get stabbed in the face by a 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm. And after getting stabbed in the face, like, lurches forward, like he is still a horror movie villain, and then eventually dies. Oh no,
Yeah,
it just seems ludicrous to me. Where, like, you could have solved this with like a little bit more simplicity, and like you can still have your little insurgent scene, but you need to at least have it make sense.
You could, I mean, so obviously they have to build up like where you learn who the Shar, how the Shar Aznavour happens, how he basically becomes. Because do they show Artesia in this episode?
Yes.
Like the mom. I mean.
Oh yeah, no, you see her die in the episode. Like you see her when she's like sickly and doing the she died of a broken heart Star Wars thing.
I mean, probably died from isolation. They probably didn't feed her. Just sitting in a towering to death and are being dehydrated. No, oh, hasn't she been through enough? Haven't you, like, you shouldn't go up and, like, so we shouldn't give her food? Like, what? I don't get, like, maybe cool. Take her out of the tower then. Are you helping her escape? Stupid show. But I think, again, hindsight being 2020, what you could have done is you could have just really you could have just opened the episode where, like, hey, unfortunately, these kids are still estranged from their mother. They're in hiding. Their hopes of seeing their mother are never going to happen again. Let's build this relationship between Castle and the real Shar. And then it makes the beginning of episode 3, that action, it makes it hit harder and really kind of establish his character a little more. They do a pretty good job of it in episode 3, I will say. And then, yeah, I mean, as for the sister, I mean, you just feel bad for her the whole time. It's like, oh, like, I'm counting the moons. We're halfway dead. Oh.
Your mom is dead.
Like,
your cat is dead.
And
your brother is leaving forever.
Yeah. Brother's just beating up some random person in a bar for no reason. Like, oh, so my brother's a dick. My mom is dead. Everybody that, like, were around us has died. People have tried to kill me. Like, so, yeah, we can be made to feel bad for her. And then, like you're saying, and then there's the weird, awkward high five at the end of the episode. And sadly, that's the part that stands up. Like, I'm Casfall. I'm Char. Cool.
Yeah, so I was going to get into. So that part was this whole thing is a retcon. Because the original Gundam story is more or less Zeon Daikun's kids escape. They were taken in by Teablo Moss. Eventually Casval Daikun leaves, goes to the military academy, befriends, the younger zombie. I forget his name now. The one with the purple hair.
Gabi. Isn't it Gabi? No, Garma.
Garma.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Garma has a great death
We
scene
do-
in actual
I will
Gundam.
say. Oh, sad. But
But
we do know who Garma is, at least in episodes 1 and 2. He's given like 30 seconds of screen time, and he looks very what's the word?
like his hair is a helmet that he puts on.
He looks inconsequential, I guess. He looks like just a spoiled child of this.
But the whole thing with Char was a retcon, because originally it was just like, hey, when he went to the military academy, he changed his name, and people ask questions of like, well, if the Daikuns were killed by the zombie family, why didn't they just realize that, oh, this person looks exactly like an older version of this child? So they place in this whole like extra plot line where there's a guy who looks exactly like him named Char Aznable that he swaps with. Did this feel like a retcon? Like, did it feel like they moved too many pieces too quickly? And do you think there's a way that they could have done this plot point that would have probably made better sense?
I mean, again, you build the relationship between the two, and then you at least make it where in the beginning of episode 3 he finds himself when they're going through that spaceport where you inevitably have them separate, where like he just reasons to himself he has no choice, and it slowly begins to like devolve his character into like this big evil being. Like again, like I think if you wanted to establish him as being like this baddie, then establish like the friendship between the two. But I think that's what they were trying to do. Is they're trying to just like, how do we make him more like, we already think apparently in this universe, based on what you're saying, we already think that Char Aznable is bad, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I've watched the 1970s series, I probably think he's bad. So how do we make him more bad? Like basically, how do we make him into the Joker? Like, because that's what it feels like. Every villain origin story is always like following. It's trying to follow the Killing Joke. Like, how did they become this way?
What do you think is the better ending? Because I am of the thought that Casval shedding his name and becoming Char Aznable by swapping places during the assassination attempt is the best way to end episode 2, rather than Artesia just being sad.
I would agree. I would entirely agree. And like Breaking Bad, for example. So that hooked me, or even Game of Thrones. So the part that hooked me in Breaking Bad is the end of, I believe it's because the first episode kind of progresses. You're learning about the characters. Is actually kind of boring. And the end of the second episode, where you're beginning to see like the danger of this world he's entering and the consequences of what they need to do. And they kill these bad guys, but he's got to dissolve the bodies. Sorry, spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it. But you see the body go through his like the ceiling of his house, and they have to clean it up because again, they're very inexperienced in this world. And now being like, okay, now this is what they're getting into. It's that slow progression. Another one is Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, the first 5 episodes still moves fairly slowly because your character building, your world building, and because you jump from character to character. But in episode 5, I believe it is, where you see the brother of Daenerys suddenly like, okay, his just existence is becoming a threat to this world that she's building. So you get the crown of gold, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, like now we feel like we have real world consequences to actions in this show, and that sets the stage for the show moving forward. That's what something that, so if you end episode 2 like that, where okay, now Casfall has made this decision to, granted he escapes this assassination attempt, but this person that he did know,
Mm-hmm.
and he has basically made a real life decision that resulted in this person's death. it sets the stage, it sets the consequences for his actions. I
Yeah.
think that would
The
be the better way
the lead up
to
to
end
that
that.
assassination is pretty goofy, but the actual scene is
Yeah.
very, very good. With him like fumbling through his papers, oh, my life is ruined. I don't have my military papers anymore, and just coming to the realization that it's like, oh, I've been
I
betrayed, and then he gets blown up.
we this is so the beginning, because I think we can cover this in the end of episode
Mm-hmm.
2. Now that we think that should have ended episode 2, that's the one where I realized, like, from the animation standpoint, I don't like this type of animation. I hate the like 0 to 10 level of emotion, and especially when you're like trying to make me sympathetic for these characters, but they just start crying. Like, I don't feel bad for you. You just like, okay, so you just made a goofy decision. You treat it like it's the end of the world. Like, I can't miss orientation. Shut the fuck. Come on.
I don't know if like
Flight.
if you are going to a place and you suddenly misplace your passport and you are fairly young, I imagine it would feel like the world is ending. I completely like empathize like with that style thing, and I think it is a solid move to have the zombies destroy a shuttle with literal hundreds of people on it to get one person.
That one, so you establish what's the redheaded zombie.
Cassilia zombie.
She doesn't care. She's like, I have this end goal, so let's like basically set off a terrorist attack.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there aren't any other consequences to this. You're
there
just
are
trying
no
to
consequences.
Kill one. And it's like, and the other problem I have with it is because also Casfall and Char, he tells Char like, hey, actually put your papers in this different bag too, because then it'll throw more people off. I'm like, so, but then the next thing he's like, where are my papers? I'm like, didn't you just say like you put them in this other bag?
No, he's like, put the gun in. No, not put the gun in the bag. Oh yeah, put the gun in the bag. Like, because so he does the swap with the bags, but he's saying put the gun in this bag because this is the thing that's like holding you up, because Char thinks that his shuttle is going to leave without him, and if he has the gun still, he's not going to be able to leave. That's why after he leaves,
Maybe
yeah, that's why after he leaves, Char's like, oh, the gun doesn't matter. Take it. It's an antique. Who cares?
This is where like you and me probably have different life experiences, because you were a better student in like school than I was, so you're like, oh, maybe it does feel like, I remember like I left my passport on our first cruise. We went on a family cruise in 2008, and I left my passport in the suitcase, and I had to go into like the suitcase was still in baggage and the whole world away. So you're going through customs. I basically didn't have a passport, but I did have my like driver's license. And I remember I'm like, oh, probably won't be able to get through, so I'll probably have to sit in a room and just wait for my bag, and then I can prove to him then. And that's where I showed him like, well, what's gonna happen? Just showed him my ID. I'm like, well, I actually have my passport in my bag. If you really need me to like find a way to get it, I will. And he's like, nope, you look American. Come on through.
Yeah. So imagine the difference between like the Bahamas, which deals with this all the time, and say like Turkey. Or
yeah, well, fair.
and that's where I draw that line. But it's time to go to school, Joey.
Oh, it's very. Hey, this is fun. I will say, like, again, like this is where the animation levels I don't like. Again, like the range of emotion thing kind of dumb, but I like the building right off of the bat where, okay, like we're here. The zombies are obviously like the high-end family, because here's all these people sitting at the front of this orientation are all zombies. So like, hey, who's there to be our student representative? Oh yeah, a zombie kid. So it sets the stage for any kind of animosity that Char might feel towards them, which I thought was well done. the only thing, like, again, Char goes from just like this kid who's just like kind of like just basically trying to survive life into this superhuman who is the first in every kind of like obstacle, first in academics. Like, we didn't get this impression before. It would have been something, at least one or two lines of dialogue we could have gotten in one of the two previous episodes.
Yeah, and they like him being overpowered, which is like a thing that that if you ever watch the actual Gundam series, you're going to laugh at the first few episodes when he's literally beaten by a person who's actively reading the mobile suit manual as he is fighting him. But they're both new types, so it works, I guess. um, but I like the tension. I like the tension of like this is the Space Force, or this is the like Colony Defense Force. The Earth Federation is here, so you get Earth Federation training, but you need to make sure that like, oh well, we don't want the space colonies to rebel, so we need to show at every opportune moment that the Earth Federation can destroy them. And so the Space Colony Defense Force becomes really scrappy and gets a chip on their shoulder, and they effectively become better leaders. It's a good like building of
They're
tension.
young kids, and
Yeah.
they're young kids who have a belief, and they feel like they have nothing to lose, because how much worse can things get? I do like the, what is it, that Federation accident where they're basically the log jam at the spaceport, where the one is like crashes, like, I'm gonna report you to the Federation authority. No, you're not, because you just crashed up there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I didn't like, you didn't need that line. You could just say like, hey, you're going to, again, change the dialogue. Hey, you're going to kill us, and something like that, and then show. I thought that could have been a better job. But it does set the stage, because again, you show the students really getting agitated about it. They're really upset. So again, that did a good job. It's kind of weird that the Earth Federation barracks is right by the Xeon Training Military School.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a good plan, but
you can
again, maybe
you can write it off where it's like, oh, this is where like the older Earth Federation people, like this is where you go in retirement, so everyone's older because the important people like that are brand new are still working, you know.
and it works history wise. I mean, again, like like at the start of the Civil War, Union forces were still occupying Fort Sumter, and that's why Fort Sumter in South Carolina, which was then already established that they were seceded from the Union. So it makes sense. It has happened historically. I'm trying to think of here's a question. Is the only reason that Casval has to hide his color of his eyes simply so they can always show him wearing sunglasses when everybody else doesn't, just because they think it makes him look cool?
I think they did that because they came to the realization when they were retconning the whole how did his name become Char thing, with like, well, we can't have them look exactly alike. And one of the big reveals of Mobile Suit Gundam is that Char has these like piercing blue eyes. So they said, okay, regular Char has brown eyes, he has blue, and then they kind of had to work backwards from that. And they needed...
I feel like in the writing, this was the first thing they wrote, because they're like, then we can put him in sunglasses. And that's what feels like very anime to me. Very anime feels like, oh, our cool character wears sunglasses when everybody else doesn't, even when he's indoors and at night, because it's cool. It's like,
well, he always...
anime.
In the anime, he wears his big stupid helmet. It's just the thing that he does. because in Gundam now, like, you have to have a character who wears a mask all the time. That's just the thing. That is what Char started, and now it's just a thing that has to always happen. So it's but they had to have a reason for like this plot point of like, well, Char had brown eyes, he has blue, so how does he effectively hide them the entire time? And he not only has this excuse of like, oh, my eyes were affected by cosmic rays, but in order to like cement that, it's like, oh, I need to wear these sunglasses all the time.
Hey,
And then
if you went through the protocols in his military school where he got that okayed by a team medic, then okay.
yeah, and then you get your the scene that you obviously didn't like because you made mention of it before, where
I didn't like it.
the
I thought it was hilarious.
Earth Federation force like sergeant like slaps him and knocks his glasses off, and I personally like that scene. I like the this thing does good with realizations. That realization that he has when it's like,
did you just tell me that was an Earth Federation officer?
yeah, that's what you can tell. You can tell by the uniforms. The Earth Federation uniform is that like beige color, and the Xeon uniforms are green.
That makes it resonate less. I thought it was a Xeon, so like it makes sense. It's students rebelling against their teachers because it's a new guard taking over the old guard. Because that's why it says like, hey, why are we basically outgunned and outmanned by this other? Isn't this military school just essentially a sham? And it becomes like, hey, again, new guard taking on the old guard. But if he's just saying these things to the Earth Federation guy, I mean, outside of rallying the troops who they should already, but shouldn't everybody feel animosity towards them? And then and again, if you already know there's tension, then why is this officer answering the question that he has? But I guess the story has to happen.
Yeah, it's just because he gets mad, and sometimes when you get mad, you do things that you're not supposed to do, and that becomes a whole thing. But yeah, the way it's set up is, so Dozo Zabi is the overseer. He's the headmaster of the military academy. He is with Xeon, but the entire thing is overseen by the Earth Federation forces. So that's why there's all the people in the beige uniforms there.
Mm-hmm. I will say that I do like the one student going up there to basically play distraction. I was worried at first. I'm like, oh gosh, some of the animes we watched in the past, I'm like, what, she's gonna go in there and take her shirt off?
I'm gonna ruin something. I'm sorry.
Oh crap. Well, that happens later. Great.
They get married. That's a meet cute scene. It's fucking gross.
Well, but at least I will say, at least that scene kind of like, I mean, that does kind of ruin things a little bit.
Yeah,
again, like she's not using any kind of sexual prowess. She just uses the fact that like she's a student going up the discussion issue with basically the head of her school, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, I'm here to create a diversion. Don't move. I like that. I thought that was well done.
Yeah, that it does have a solid build of like, hey, are you gonna come over here? Nope. Like, are you gonna do anything? Nope. Why? Because I'm here to just keep you here. So
and that I will say is great.
So we have not talked about Char's friend, his ride or die. Emphasis on the second part.
No. No, nothing like playing the martyr for your side, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the major plot beats of this one is one of Char's best friends from Texas Colony is in the military academy. They're roommates, and
the actual Char, by the way.
Yeah, he understands that, and he catches on very quickly that this isn't the same person. Like, he's completely different, and Char tries to play it cool at first, but it doesn't really work. And dude's cool with it. Like, eventually knows it's like, oh, wow. you're
He's a believer. He's a blind believer. He's like, no, like, I've been on your side the whole time. I hate these zombie scum. I want to help you take them over. But again, like, we've already established, and he knows, like, basically this guy's played a major role in killing your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to trust him because you believe in what he represents. And that's fine, but your actions have consequences, and obviously we paid that off right at the end of this episode.
Well, granted, he doesn't know that that Casval has killed Char. For all he knows, the zombie. He explains that the zombies killed him, and
They did.
he,
Kind of,
he
man.
just needs to assume his identity because of secrecy. But it takes a bit of a leap. It also takes a bit of a leap that when the Dawn Rebellion happens, him going like, "Hey, you should be on a radio frequency that only I can communicate with you, and I'm giving you this special suicide mission," and basically arrange.
And I'm the only one that knows you're traveling in this enemy tank, so friendly fire could happen.
Mm-hmm. It, in general, this will.
That was one part of the scene is all of a sudden because he's like, Casval, and then they blow up the tank, and then after the tank is blown up, it's like, I told you, my name is Shar Aznavour. Like, dude, can't you say that at least before the missiles come? It resonates more if he hears you.
Yeah, he's just
like,
he's just talking to no one.
Yeah. Like I understand it from a bad guy standpoint of like the whole actions like this guy, like I feel like I can't trust anybody about this right now. What if this person does slip up and reveal my identity? Like, again, from a bad guy origin story, I get, like, I don't question the direction of the story or where the writing of the story goes at that point, but it does make for entertaining where we can like sit there and critique the plot a little bit.
And now, as someone who is a dabbler in history, especially military history, because I decided that in my old age, I'm going to focus on just putting things out there into the world that is just me screaming into the void. You decide to get into World War II. We all have our demons. But do you think the Dawn Rebellion is too easy? Or do you think that do you think the lack of resistance that shows in the Dawn Rebellion is good because you need to have your storming of the Bastille. You need to have your rebellious action that basically goes off without a hitch in order to really set off this 1 year war that's going to happen in the next 3 episodes. Well,
I think it does a good job.
The 1 year war builds in these next 3 episodes, rather.
I would compare it more to the Civil War, but I think it does a good job because, like, what we established and this is what the 3rd episode does very well, is it establishes that Earth Federation does not take the Zeon seriously, right? At least I'm getting that impression. Like, hey, they're just like, really, what threat do they pose to us? It feels very Civil War-ish, where the Union forces still knew, like, hey, we have the industry, we have the manpower, so we don't need to take this southern side seriously. And then they figured out in the first 2 years of the Civil War, hey, we were actually very wrong about this, and things got very bloody very fast. And to be honest, the South was winning the war in the first 2 years of the Civil War. So I think, like, especially establishing this military school, kind of this new guard that out of nowhere that nobody saw coming, and really seizing the initiative is a really well done way to set the stage for what they say is like, oh, and then this sets off the 1 year war, which was this big bloody thing. Because Earth Federation, again, we just talked about, why would you put your army barracks right next to their military school? Well, because they didn't take them seriously, and this is what happened. No, actually, from that standpoint, I think storytelling in this episode was excellent. I think they did a very good job. There was one part that I just thought of that just left my brain. That I was just like, that's kind of goofy, but I'll hopefully think of it in a little bit.
Is it like when they're jetpacking around and dropping grenades on people? Because that's pretty much the entire battle.
No, that was cool. Yeah, because that's like basically dropping an airborne and do it like behind enemy lines. So I thought, no, that part was well done. Or just like the Casval, like going into like basically like, hey, you're the commanding officer. Basically come at you with surprise because you better surrender now or things are going to go much worse for you. So, no, I thought that was well done.
So
I'm trying to think of what was the scene. There was one other scene that was like, that's kind of goofy, but
well, we're going to get into
probably
selling some mobile suit models because there aren't a lot of mobile suits in this. That's kind of building up, but it's on the outskirts of this thing, which is going to play a bigger role in the next 3 episodes. Is the creation of the mobile suit, and you get a little bit of that. You get to establish Ivo Manovsky, who is not necessarily the inventor, the founder, the guy who discovers the Manovsky particle. Because I mean, if you're a scientist and you find a new particle, you need to name it after yourself. That's just tradition. Do you
other people name it after you? But yeah.
Do you understand how the Manovsky particle works and basically what the gist of that stuff is? Because this,
I understand that. It sounds like they make a smaller fusion reactor.
Yeah, that's it. The Manovsky particle allows the engines for the mobile suits to be smaller, so you can actually defend them. Because they're always talking about, it's like, oh, do you really think we'll put money into this thing that has its entire engine on its back? So it allows it to be smaller and armored, on top of being able to output a lot more energy. On top of the energy that it actually outputs messes with radar. So that's one of the reasons why, if you go back to the battle scene and you don't need to worry about going back to the battle scene, because it's actually going to just show to you in a clipped format in later episodes. But one of the things that makes mobile suits so deadly is you can't see them on radar, because not only are they fast, but they're pushing out this thing that basically blinds you. So that's why that's the thing that they establish is war becomes much closer because of mobile suits, and that's how they. But that will allow it to kind of make a little bit more sense in these next 3 episodes, because that is kind of the main thing that they give you on this is what the Manovsky particle is, and they're going to keep saying, like, oh, the Manovsky particle density is this or something like that. It's this.
Do they establish then how the Earth Federation picks up on this too?
Yes. So did you stay for the credits on episode 3? Did you watch the extra scene at the end?
Like the 13-year-old Amuro Ray, right?
Yes, that is the main character of the actual Mobile Suit Gundam series. He is the son of basically the understudy of the first pupil of Ivo Manovsky, and he is going to the colony, which is a Earth Federation project, because they are making a mobile suit for themselves, and that is the Gundam.
Okay. So that at least, I was going to say, so if the Xeon came out with this technology first, how come they just didn't wipe? But okay. So they came out relatively at the same time.
Yeah.
That's how that works. Now I just thought of it, the other problem with this episode, and again, I generally did like this episode, but I'm being nitpicky here. Where they have the one scene where the sister says, oh, and Char should be graduating soon. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to my brother. And then the dad's like, yeah, but I never heard from him. I wrote him twice, and then he doesn't write back. It's like, don't you call? You think you'd have some way of trying to communicate with your son to learn whether he's actually alive over there, or do you just are you just now estranged? Just oh, I guess he's never gonna talk to me again. Oh well.
Or maybe they just don't talk to each other because they know that, I don't know, it would be intercepted or something like that. Space physics, space. Just say space, and it works.
Oh, and then there's the where. So I guess this is where you probably get your new type, where Gumzabi, Garma Zabi is mad because basically Char got his physics answer in front of everybody. He's like, "You embarrassed me. Now we're gonna bully you." And then one of his little henchmen grabbed Char's shoulder, but it was like because he grabbed Char's shoulder, he's like, "Actually, now my hand hurts," and he pushed him away.
Yeah.
It must be establishing like I'm actually a mutant.
He has very strong shoulder muscles. He just tensed them up and actually hurt his hand. No, that's it is. I attacked you with my mind. Is really what it is doing. Like I said, it is the stupidest thing in Gundam, and just.
Hey, I mean, Gundam is like the Ant-Man. What if mutants were actually the real bad guys? What if mutants were the Nazis and the Nazis just didn't create bad mutants? Like, oh, I don't want a world like that, but
yeah. So, before we get into scheduling for the next 3 episodes here? What are your general thoughts? Like, what are you just hoping for more action with these next 3 episodes? I will say that they're more action heavy. But
no,
yeah.
I'm just curious. I am legit curious of where they go with the story. The story does interest me. I like the idea of like what you established in the first scene. I like the idea of basically Char's like this pseudo futuristic Red Baron, I guess from like World War II lore. I mean, because even today we somewhat romanticize the Red Baron for his skills as a pilot in World War One, still realizing he actually was a bad guy. He was a German fighter pilot, like who was still fighting for the enemy. But he's still romantic. I mean, we have like the pizza named after him and all that stuff. So, I'm curious to where they go to that story, and I'm curious to see like, does he join the zombies? Does he? I mean, it sounds like he's still inevitably. What did you say? It's his Count of Monte Cristo plot. So inevitably there must be like some sort of climax building between the two, where there's an actual like square off instead of like he joins them and they just unite the Zeon against this Earth Federation. So I am curious to see where that goes, because there's a lot of, I will say there are a lot points in this show that I'm very interested to see. Will Rambaral see Char again? What will become of the sister? It's very, very interesting.
Okay, perfect. And do you think you'll go through the next 3 episodes in a week? Did you want to do this same time next week?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. We can make sure that it is noted on that side. But yeah, I can tell you that the zombies are about to do something really bad.
More than they've already done?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. And they linger on it. It's probably the best episode. But it is bad. It is tragic. But yeah, and I can tell you that most of Char's Count of Monte Cristo plot is saved for the actual series. So, I mean, I showed you Cassilia Zabi taking a beam rifle to the face, so that's that's how she bites it.
Fair.
But yeah, so
this could be watching Gundam the series, because if it is, dang it.
So there are 2 ways to watch Gundam the series. On Netflix, you can watch movie versions of the series where they've kind of chopped it up, and basically said like, okay, here is just a movie version of like the first part of the series, so you don't need to watch it piecemeal. But every single episode is like 2.5 hours long. It is. Yeah. It is a lot. It's also only subtitled, so there's no dub there. But I watched the first one, and it was... Mobile Suit Gundam is better than I remember it being, but it's probably because I watched the episodic version. And yeah, after watching this, you see Char as this, like, unbeatable badass, and then in literally the first, like, 10 episodes of Gundam, he is relegated to... He is the general, like, villain of the week, where he shows up and this teenager beats the crap out of him, and then he leaves going like, "I'll get you, Amuro!" That's... It's not quite that bad, but it's
storytelling in the 70s versus storytelling now.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But yeah, I would probably recommend the movies over anything. But I think after this, we might take a science fiction break because we've been doing a lot of science fiction. Um, I don't know. Maybe do Vinland Saga. Maybe do something like focused on
Are there
Vikings.
animes that aren't science fiction?
Yes,
I didn't
there
know
are a
this was
lot of
possible.
them. May Samurai Champloo if you want Cowboy Bebop with samurai. It's
Hey, I will say Cowboy Bebop was slightly more interesting. Do I think it was the greatest? No, but it got more interesting after I watched the live action series and realized like the world building is even better in the cartoon.
Did you watch the
So
entire thing?
not all of it.
Okay, the
I
entire
got
thing's
about
very good.
halfway.
But anyway, that
I
is
like
it.
live action series. I did. I count me as one of the very, very few that actually liked the live action series.
I still haven't watched it. I haven't brought myself to do that, and now I have Heels to watch, which is
Oh, I don't want to watch it. I
you
don't.
don't have to watch Heels.
I feel
You can choose to watch Heels.
free.
They
For
literally
some reason, Stars is promoting it. I was like, "Do you want Stars free for a week? You can watch Heels on Prime." It's like, don't make me do this, you stupid. No.
they literally have no idea
Who's
where this
the
plot is
mystery man
going, so
showing up? Yes.
they have no idea where this plot is going, so they've dropped Ace off a cliff in this most recent episode, like in the middle of nowhere in Alabama. It's like, okay.
Like he went to the train station like Yellowstone? Is that what?
Yeah. He just drove off because he's like trying to find himself, and then he's just walking in the wilderness and falls off a cliff, and that's the end of the second episode.
This shows so much.
It-
I hate it.
It is established that he's still alive at least, so there is.
Do you know Territory Wrestling is still alive in 2023? Dumb shit.
But yeah, that is Animesplaining for the first half of Gundam. We will return for the second half, and then figure out something that's probably not sci-fi for the next time. Maybe we'll watch iShield 21. If we'll get into sports anime, we'll watch the anime viewing of American football. It's gonna be great.
Oh, fair enough. I'll give that a try. I want to see what like other countries that aren't necessarily interested in football think of football.
I'll need to subscribe to Crunchyroll in between then, but fortunately I'll have a month to do it. So, yeah, that is goodbye from me, and you can say whatever you want to say goodbye, what have you.
Adios, amigos.
And good
Hasta la vista.
good
Till next
Gundam
time.
to you all, and to all good night, I guess.